Welcome everyone to the part 2 video on Fun with Equilibrium. In this video, we're going to tackle how double shifts work and how you can graph them, and also what the tricky part is when you find out that with a double shift, without getting very specific, which we're not going to be doing, you will always have some change to the price and quantity that will be ambiguous or undeterminate, as in you can't figure it out. Now, before we get into how the graphing works, the most important thing you need to be able to do is understand how to interpret the shifts. So if you notice in your scenarios, there will be two shifts in the explanation. They'll say if something happens and the other thing happens. Now remember, if you're in period 2, there aren't any double shifts, so you can actually go back to the first video and work with some of those. But for the rest of you guys, double shifts should work this way. First, interpret the statement. Notice it's an if and then an and. Read the first thing and first determine, does that affect supply or demand? Remember, this is the thing you need to figure out. And once again, having your change in demand and changes in supply worksheets can really help you out. Once you figure if the if statement affects, let's say, demand, then you have to determine whether it increases demand or decreases demand. That's why writing out things at the bottom part where it says demand will and supply will is really useful. So once you have demand, you know the other part of the statement must be affecting supply. So, or the other one if supply is first. So go, all right, it affects supply, read it and say, would that increase how much people make it the same if they're selling the good for the same price, or decrease it? Once you make that interpretation, you can then go ahead and start graphing. So always take those in those steps. Go, if this happens, okay, if, does that affect supply or demand? If you're like, okay, that if is supply, and does it increase it or decrease? Okay, decreases it. So supply will decrease, and look at the and statement, goes, that must be demand. Would that increase consumers wanting to buy this or decrease it? And then you go from there. That's the most important thing that I've seen a lot of people having trouble with. So once you interpret that and have the box written in, you're well on your way to getting this assignment done and making life easy. So let's go ahead and look at our graph. Remember, if you're on part 2 and you've already done part 1, you can always go to this little box, and I'll show you right here once I share the screen. And you can always go to this box up here in the corner, and that, when you click on it, it will send you to this page, which shows you all the other graphs we have already done, or you have already done and saved and made a copy of. So you can always go back to your work. So we'll go ahead to the editing one where I put my name right up here, and we can start seeing this. So remember, you're going to type in your if and statement, and then you're going to want to go to supply will and demand will. Once you have that filled in for these, the rest of it gets easy. And you're going to be shifting these curves and these quantities as such. Now, I'm going to use a slightly different tool to show you guys how these shifts work and how the ambiguous nature of some of these in effect using a different program. But essentially, you'll figure out that it works about the same way. So if I go ahead and say, all right, in a scenario, and this might apply to you and it might not. Remember, every class has different stuff. If I had a scenario where, let's say, demand increases, remember, increases always shift to the right, just like how these numbers go 10, 20, 30. They're always increasing as they go right. You need to shift demand to the right if it's an increase. And let's say in this one, supply increases as well. Okay, a few things are going to happen right here. So what I can do is I can go ahead and mark out my quantity. So remember, my initial quantity was right here at 60. So now it's at 85. Okay, cool. Now I might want to go ahead and, here, I'm going to change things just a little bit. I'm going to let's make it a small change in supply, and I'm going to make a larger change in demand. All right, so still, if I go to my quantity here, remember, you can use the arrow keys on your computer to shift things slightly. And I go ahead and say, all right, well, I went from 60 to now like 84. I definitely know quantity increased. But some of you guys are going to go ahead and draw this as I did here, with a small change in supply and a big change in demand. And you'll look at this new quantity here and say, all right, or new price, and go, well, it went from 5 to 6, so price increased. Pause right there, because you just kind of made a little bit of a mistake. Now, if you graphed it and it looked like this, that's fine. But there's a little hidden truth that you're not showing. Because if this is our equilibrium right now, with our S2 and D2 where they meet, so D2 and S2, that's our new equilibrium, we'd be at 6 and 84. But I didn't tell you to shift demand a lot or supply a little. In fact, you might draw the opposite. Let's say I shifted demand a little, but supply I shifted a lot. Well, then I would have something new. I would go ahead and find out that my price, instead of increasing from 5 to 6, now decreased from 5 to 4, even though my quantity is still sitting right here at 84. So here's what you need to be figuring out. You need to figure out, what will quantity do? Will it increase, decrease, or can you not tell? And then you also need to figure out, what is price doing? Did it increase? Did it decrease? Or can you not tell? Well, here's the thing. No matter what scenario, whether supply is a big increase or a small one, or demand's a big increase or decrease, we know the quantity went from 60 to 80. So quantity definitely increases. And that's what you could write down on, type out in your document right now. But if we notice, it depends on how demand and supply increase. One example, price increased from 5 to 6. The other one, price decreased from 5 to 4. So is price going to increase or decrease? Well, here's how this works. The answer is, we can't tell, or it's ambiguous, as in it's indeterminate. And that's what you would actually write as your answer. It depends if supply was a big increase or a small increase, and relative to demand. So remember, if supply was a small increase and demand was big, price would increase. If supply was a bigger increase and demand was smaller, price would decrease. Well, I didn't tell you if supply increased in a large way or demand in a small way. I just said they increase. As a matter of fact, if they increased or decreased about the same amount, the price could actually sit right here at $5 and not change at all. So you might be going, what do I put in these answers? Well, what you do is you would go ahead and graph it, and you would say, all right, supply increased and demand, that's not the right one, and demand, oh, come on, okay. Let me just undo that last move. And demand is going to go ahead and increase too. So you go ahead and graph your demand. And you would go ahead and put your price and quantity, those things right here, there. But you notice that quantity must increase, but price is about the same. So if you definitely know quantity increase, you type in quantity will increase. But price, that is when you put ambiguous. Because you see it's the same, but it depends, because supply could be smaller, demand could be shift in a larger way, and that would cause price to be up here. But also the inverse could happen too. I could have demand being a very small shift, and I could then have supply being a larger shift, and that would cause price to decrease. So we don't know how much they shifted, so price would be ambiguous. A key little cheat sheet is, notice on this example, supply increased and demand increased. So both of those, supply and demand, increased. If they do that, you will always know that quantity will change and price will be ambiguous. On the other hand, if you have a scenario where supply decreased, but demand increased, well, then a different situation happens, because now our new equilibrium is up here. So we know that even if demand is a small change and supply is a bigger change, price is still higher. So we know that the price must have increased in this scenario. However, quantity in this situation just decreased a little bit, but I could always make supply a small change and demand, on the other hand, a bigger change. Ugh, I don't know why it's not. And now quantity increased. So because we can't tell whether quantity increased or decreased, quantity is ambiguous. The key to this is if supply decreases but demand increases, see how they're going the opposite ways? Or it could be supply increase or demand decrease. But we know if they're going the opposite way, we know price will definitely change in a predictable way. It will increase or decrease, but quantity will be ambiguous. So that's your little cheat sheet for the double shifts. You know that if you graph it, and some of you guys might want to just go ahead and graph it, and you'll graph them and it'll look something like, well, there's our demand. And if I pick my supply, and it'll look like it didn't change. So price went from here's our original equilibrium to our new price right there. I could even drag this guy over. But my quantity goes ahead and it's going to sit right here. And you'll notice that price definitely changed, it increased, but quantity, you might want to say didn't change, but that's only because you drew it that way. And if you draw it that way and quantity looks like it didn't change, that means it's ambiguous. You could have changed that very differently by how much you shift in supply or demand. So if it lands about the same spot, that's your ambiguous answer. So in this graph, you would go ahead and put, all right, demand will increase, supply will decrease. You put those in there, and then price in this one, because it's an opposite shifter, price will increase. In this case, if I flipped it and supply increase and demand decrease, price would go down. So we know price will change for sure. It'll increase or decrease depending on your scenario, but quantity will definitely be ambiguous. So that's how you can tell. If they're always going the same way, it's going to be a change in quantity. If they're going opposite ways, then it's going to be a change in price, and the quantity would be ambiguous. I hope that helped you guys out. And remember, once you finish, go to File and Download As. And then you can save it as a PDF or a PowerPoint. I prefer PDF, but these two top options are both correct. Do not pick these. And when you save it to your computer, and then upload it to Edsby, and your assignment will be submitted. All right. Good luck, everyone. And I look forward to talking to you next week. We'll be covering market failures. Have a good day.